correct me. So 32 surgeries is what we saw online.
Yeah.
6 nose jobs, an eye surgery, face lift, brow lift, temple lift.
I wanted to change who I was completely. I wanted to erase all traces of my father. I'd look at a picture of the old me and I think, I don't know that person. That person is dead.
Thoughts on Dylan, because you brought her up.
Not a fan. But I don't believe Dylan Mulvaney is actually trans. I think he's seen something. He's mocked women, saying he's going to have a period, he needs tampons, he's going to get pregnant. Now he's a lesbian. Stop shoving Dylan in people's faces. There are actual people out there.
Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Let's Get Into It podcast, hosted by me, Sloan. And today we are joined by a very special guest, Oli London.
Let's get into. Oh, sorry.
Let's get into it.
Yeah.
So Oli London is a very interesting character. Doing research on him was complicated. I mean, I've got that you have done some singing. You are an author, influencer, activist, public speaker, TV personality, and a huge fan, or at least was a huge fan of K-pop.
Still love K-pop. I'm just not as crazy about it, but still a fan. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into all of that. But how are you doing?
I'm doing better than ever, to be honest. This is the happiest I've ever been in my life because I found self-acceptance. I finally found happiness from within. Stopped all the surgery, sticking to just non-surgical things now like filler and Botox. But I'm just in a good place. I'm a happy place. And I'm just trying to do things to help other people now, activism, helping kids, helping parents, helping moms and dads and stuff. And that is so fulfilling. So yeah, we're in a really good place. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think that's so important too, because I'm in my 20s now and there's so many people who just don't know who they are. And, we all go through our different struggles or life experiences to figure that out. But to be in that point, that's really impressive. And that's great for you. So what are you doing in LA right now?
So I actually have my book coming out next week. So I've just been doing interviews here and stuff and just having a great time. I come to LA all the time. The weather is so beautiful. The beaches are beautiful. The people are amazing. So yeah, just been doing a lot of interviews and, trying to raise awareness of the topics I talk about in my book and, and try and do a bit of activism with that as well.
Yeah, that's cute. So you are from London, right?
Yes.
That's where your name kind of comes from.
Hence the name, yes. So, from London, but I've been, back and forth to America for the last 10 years. So I have a big interest in, the news here, the political scene. It's a lot more interesting and unique than the UK, which is, it's a very small island. There's not much going on there.
Yeah, and you currently are living in the UK.
Yes. So, I travel all the time, but yes, based in the UK and then back and forth between the US and several other countries. Yeah.
So what was your growing up life like? Were your parents together? Were you guys pretty middle class, well off?
Yeah, so I would say middle class. My father was like an interior designer and decorator. So, he did well with that, but I didn't have a good relationship with my father. And, I'm very close to my mum, but my dad was always very emotionally abusive and, really nasty. And, he always wanted me to be, a strong, manly man, right?
Yeah.
Just like him. He wanted me to be his clone. And I didn't want that because he wasn't nice to me. So I rejected that. So I tried to become, closer to my mother. And it was a tough relationship with my father. And, he left my family at one point and haven't spoken to him since. But, I grew up in just outside London in the English countryside. It was a beautiful place. And, I had some good memories, but also had some, bad memories of being bullied in my teenage years at school. So that affected me. But I like being British. I like the accent. No more Korean stuff. I still love K-pop, but just back to being me.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I also totally relate to, I came out at 14, so I was super young and it wasn't that accepting. And I feel like having your father kind of reject you, and I don't know if it's just because of you being gay or just who you were in general, that also pushes you into this place where you're kind of searching for who you are to kind of fulfill this need of wanting to be accepted by your parent, but then truly he wasn't. So is your relationship better nowadays, or is it still kind of...
So I don't have any relationship with my father. I haven't seen or spoken to him in 10 years and it's just going to remain that way, unfortunately. Yeah. But, with the rest of my family, I have repaired that relationship because I put them through a difficult time because I struggled, with my identity. I struggled, with the surgeries and changing, trying to find who I was. And that put them through hell and back, really. And, I'm trying to repair that now. And, I've realized that I wasn't in a good place mentally. And I've overcome that now, but I'm just trying to repair the damage that I've done in the past.
And there's a lot to your story, but I want to go ahead and go back to 2013 to when you moved to Korea, I believe. So that's a big jump to make, expensive too. At this point, so you were in the UK and you were obsessing over Korean culture. You ultimately wanted to go there. What like prompted you to actually make the move?
So it was actually a fateful Google search one day. And I was like, I love traveling. And even back then, because it was helping boost my confidence. And I was always very insecure and shy. And I just Googled one day, teaching abroad. And I studied English at university. And then Korea came up. I was like, okay. And at the time, I didn't know too much about the culture. I loved the history. Didn't know too much about K-pop. I'd only listened to like one K-pop song. So, that really changed my life. And then, what happened is I got accepted. I went there. I was there for a year in total teaching English on a beautiful island called Jeju. And, it's hard not to fall in love with Korean culture because it's so cool. It's so cute. The music's amazing. The films are amazing. And I just fell in love. And I think the first time in my life, I actually, I struggled with my sexuality as a teen. I actually came out when I was in Korea. And that was the first time in my life where I felt independent and free. I had no constraints. And, I started to think maybe I can change myself. Maybe I can get rid of the way I looked and change all of that. And, that's when the journey began. And, it was a 10-year battle trying to struggle to find the right look and accept myself. And I've overcome it now. But yeah, it was definitely a journey.
Did you move to Korea like with a partner or have a relationship at that point with anyone? Or is that when you started dating when you came out? Or how did you kind of come to terms at that point?
So, I actually dated a few girls, actually. So when I was in my early 20s, I dated a few women and just didn't feel right at the time. And, I was really struggling to accept myself because nowadays, you just come out and it's just normal. Nobody bats an eyelid. You don't even talk about it. But, even when I was growing up, early 2000s, it's a little bit more of a difficult conversation. You had to kind of announce it and tell your friends and family. So that was actually the first time in my life that I, dated guys, and Korean guys are so good looking, I have to say. And yeah, so I did date a few guys there. I had, a few boyfriends there and stuff. And, some of them didn't even speak English, but it was kind of cute using Google Translate. But that was like a moment when I was like, finally starting to explore who I was. And I think I'd suppressed that person for so long. So it felt good. And I think that's why over the years I wanted to live in that virtual reality of being trapped in that 2013 in Korea, because it was such a beautiful feeling.
Well, I think also, how old were you at that point? Were you like were you college age or?
So I was like 23.
Okay, so you're pretty young too. And
yes.
then I think it's so important at that age to move around because like even me, I was like in the same place for most of my life. And then when I started moving around, you just see so much more. You start to learn about yourself. And obviously you moving there, you were super inspired by the culture and BTS and all of that. Can you kind of explain where it went from like, I guess for you, it's an obsession too, because you were trying to like identify yourself with it. So you just became personally so obsessed. Can you kind of describe how you were so obsessed with them? Like what were the beginning stages like before you started going under the knife and transforming yourself completely?
But really it was, like I said, before I moved to Korea, I didn't know that much about K-pop. But when I was there, I suddenly started to fall in love. The songs were amazing. Everyone looked so perfect. And in Korea, there's a real pressure to look a certain way in order to achieve happiness. And you see it, everyone has that perfect image. So I felt, maybe there's a possibility I can be as happy as these people. And, I was thinking maybe the only way to achieve that is to look a certain way. So I knew I was never going to be happy. I knew I'd never accept myself as the way I was. So then, I saw all these plastic surgery billboards literally on the metro, on the side of buses, on the side of buildings.
Yeah.
All the K-pop stars clearly had surgery. And I was like, oh, wow. So I started loving K-pop. I started watching the videos. I was like, why can't I look as good as that? So then I went to the doctor and, BTS did launch in 2013. So I was like, when people go to doctor, you normally show them a picture of what you want to look like, right? Somebody might show Angelina Jolie, I want her lips. So you show the doctor the picture. So I was like, which person do I want to look like? I was like, okay, Jimin's hot, he's cute, he's handsome. Let me go with this look. And then that's where it kind of began. And, originally just had a nose surgery, a non-surgical eye surgery. And then it became an addiction. And it became like a really bad addiction, very dangerous. And, I could have died undergoing some of these procedures. And really spiraled from there.
So Jimin specifically is one that you kind of like targeted. Like you wanted to like, were you attracted to him? Or you wanted to like be like him? Or was it kind of like a mix of both?
Jimin is so attractive. So how can anyone not be attracted to Jimin? But it was really, I just wanted to replace who I was. And it sounds bad now that I look back, but I wanted to change who I was completely. You know, I wanted to erase all traces of my father, erase all traces of this person that I used to get bullied, right? And adopt this new identity. So that's where that really came from. I was like, you know, this person's really attractive. They're beautiful. They seem so happy. They're performing on TV. I want to be like that. And, you know, I was just dreaming and dreaming and dreaming. And then I thought, maybe this is possible because Korea is the plastic surgery capital of the world. Maybe the doctors can give him this aesthetic and maybe my life will be as good as Jimin's. That was my mentality. It's like I wanted to live his life because he seemed happy and he seemed confident, beautiful, and he was, you know, adored by so many people.
And so just like, is this like a rumor? But like I've heard that like the Korean pop stars, don't they have to go through like a lot of training, like boot camp essentially? And like they are kind of forced to get these surgeries, I guess, to achieve that goal. That's all true, right?
It's all true. You know, they'd never like to talk about it. There's a definitely a dark side of the K-pop industry that never gets exposed because it's a very carefully curated image. You know, K-pop is manufactured. And when I was there, I remember when I was at plastic surgery clinics having consultations, this was also in 2019. So I went back and had some more surgery. You know, I saw groups of teenage boys and teenage girls and, you know, they were obviously about 14 or 15 and they're in groups, right? So, you know, okay, they're not with their mum or dad. They're with a group of people like clearly managers taking them for plastic surgery before they become famous. So that's what happens. Like 15, 16-year-olds are having, you know, jaw surgeries, chin surgeries, nose, eyes to achieve that look. And they're going through rigorous training, sometimes 7 years in total. And that's hard enough. And then, you know, they've only got a small chance of actually making it. And they might do that training for 7 years in surgery and they might be cut out of the band when it becomes the final lineup, you know? So a bit like American Idol, they cut someone out the band and stuff at the end. So it's a really tough situation and a lot of them don't make money as well. So they really are basically abused. You know, the management take all their money. A lot of them are in debt. And then once they finish with the K-pop industry, they're basically discarded and they can't really get a job. They can't get an office job. They can't do anything because firstly, they're famous. Very difficult. And secondly, they don't have those skills, right? They're used to just dancing, singing and performing. So it's a tough life and people don't see that. And at the time I just saw this dream, I was like, beautiful, happy, confident, successful. I want a piece of that.
So before we get into the actual like physical changes that you went through with the surgeries, like when did you like, because from my understanding, I mean, did you ever actually believe you were like trans-Korean, like mentally?
I mean, I was going through a kind of crazy mental stage, but you know, my thinking at the time was if people can adopt all these different identities, which we see these days, you know, why can't I have a different identity? And you know, there's like people say there's like 100 different genders and stuff and identities. So I was like, why can't I just say that I'm Korean? I want the look, I like the lifestyle, I love the culture. You know, the transracial thing I know is, you know, it's more about people that are adopted into families or, you know, something like that. And that wasn't a term I came up with. It was just a term that was attached to me. But, you know, I wasn't doing it to be offensive to Koreans. I just generally wanted to be a part of that culture. And there are many foreigners that go to Korea. They, you know, have the surgery, they embrace the culture and they, you know, they start speaking Korean, they start doing the hairstyle, the clothes and stuff, and they feel that way. And so I don't think I was alone in that. Obviously, I took it a bit too far, a bit too extreme. And, you know, now I've seen that was not healthy.
Yeah. So I would say like, so at this point where you are like mentally adopting this Korean like ethnicity. So like, were you like posting on social media? Like were you like an influencer at this point? So like you were posting about your life and that's kind of like, because I guess like if you want to be like, you know, trans Korean, you can kind of like keep it to yourself and live your life. But if you're a social media person like yourself, then so you were sharing this online. And was this around like, I mean, obviously not 2013. So what, like more like 2017, 2019, like?
Yeah. So when I was 16, when I was at college, I actually, you know, was on MySpace. So that was like very, very OG social media, if you remember as well. And that was fun, you know, and what it was is social media, you adopt a different identity. So you use filters, you create an image. It's very curated. And, you know, that was the first time at 16 that I was actually able to escape my real life. And, you know, people were saying, you look good, you're great and stuff. And I became quite popular on MySpace. And then, you know, it was around 2016, 2017, I started using Instagram more. And, you know, I think it's that validation, you know, and I think a lot of us search for that these days. It's that serotonin rush of, you know, people liking you because of the way you look and because your pictures and stuff. And so I think that certainly spurred me on with the surgeries and the identity. And, you know, at the time I didn't see the harm in saying the Korean, you know, I'm Korean and stuff, like I didn't see the harm. Now I see the sensitivities around that, the cultural sensitivities. But at the time I was like, so lost in that world. I was like, this is my only path in life. I have to do this and stuff. And so I started sharing it. And, obviously a mixed reaction. You get hate. You get some people saying, oh my God, you look like a K-pop star and stuff. And then I actually did music. But I think, I don't really use social media as much now. I use Twitter, but now it's not about validation. It's not about, getting that confidence or serotonin hit, because I actually accept myself now for who I am.
Yeah. And I think that's lovely. I mean, that's like what everyone like strives for in this life. So just to backtrack briefly. So would you say like in hindsight, that was like cultural appropriation, right? By like almost definition, I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see it at the time because I was really in a crazy mental headspace.
Yeah.
And I was addicted to all the surgery and looking a certain way. But yeah, it wasn't a good thing. And, I have apologized. I did apologize last year to all Korean people because I was like, I did take my obsession a bit too far, and I'm sorry for that. And I do understand the sensitivities now. At the time, I didn't. So I've had that kind of period of reflection, but yeah, I do get it now.
Are there like Korean people who just like hate you because of like that part of it?
To be honest, I did actually get a lot of love for them,
Yeah.
And all the, online people, they're always like, oh my God, they hate you and stuff. You're never welcome in Korea. And they were trying to get me banned and like starting change.org
Really?
petitions, and trying to send me off to space. That was one petition, got like a few thousand signatures. But yeah, the Koreans were always sweet, sweet. They, because I think they thought I was fun. And I think Korean people, from my experience, they love it when a foreigner embraces their culture.
Yeah.
I took it a bit too far. I mean, they always play me on their shows, their comedy shows in Korea and stuff. But I think they saw, something cute about it, that I was so in love with their culture that I took it a bit far. And look, everyone gets surgery there. So I wasn't doing anything hugely drastic.
Yeah. So when's the last time you've been back?
So I haven't been back for a few years. So I was meant to go in 2021, and then there was the pandemic.
Yeah.
So, but I would like to go this year. I would like to do that, and also to Japan. But Korean people can be rest assured, I'm not going to try to become Korean again. You guys are safe.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the surgeries, because I think, the world's obsessed with like plastic surgery in general. Even like I was like driving here, I saw a billboard for a new plastic surgery podcast. Like they just love the fascination with it. Before we get into like your immediate, like the beginning surgeries, like how did you always have like a likeness for plastic surgery growing up as like a little gay boy? Like you weren't fearful of it. You kind of like were interested in that as well.
You know what? No, because I wasn't exposed to it. So I grew up outside London in a small town, and I wasn't familiar with that. I didn't even think it was a possibility. So I just thought that I was going to be trapped, feeling ugly and looking ugly in my eyes forever. And I felt I was basically cursed. So I thought there was no solution possible. So it was only when I went to Korea, and that you're literally surrounded by it. I mean, billboards,
kind of like LA.
Literally like LA, but like on a 10 times more scale. So that was when I first discovered, there are possibilities for me to get out of this deep-rooted unhappiness. If I just do a few tweaks. And originally it just started with the nose. I just thought, let me just do the nose, then I'll be happy. And then, what happens with surgery, you do one, then you do another. It's a bit like tattoos, right? People start with one and then they just can't stop. So kind of became like that. But yeah, I wasn't exposed to it as a kid, so I didn't think it was an option. If I knew it was an option, I would have, gone for it a bit younger.
Yeah. No, I get that. I always like was really insecure about my nose, and I got it done when I was like 18, and it was like something I was always so fixated on. But now I'm really happy with it, but I understand. Like I feel
That's
like
great.
it could always be smaller though,
But I think that's human nature. We always are self-critical. We're our own worst critics. And, you feel that. I think everybody has something about them that they don't like, whether it's the nose, whether it's their ears. And we're all like that. But I think the most important thing is as long as we're happy and confident. And look, I think a nose job, if you've always struggled with your nose, can really enhance your life, and it can give you a huge confidence boost.
Yeah, it did.
But also, it's good to do things kind of take it easy. Don't go down my route. You're doing the jaw and the chin and the eyes. Just take it easy. Just do what's really bothered you your whole life, and don't take it too far.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the plastic surgery. So correct me. So 32 surgeries is what we saw online.
Yeah.
6 nose jobs, an eye surgery, face lift, brow lift, temple lift, teeth procedure, and skin whitening injections?
Yes.
What were those like? Like, did you notice a difference? Like, how quickly would you notice a difference from that?
Well, it was actually in the face. So they inject peptides, which is like vitamins, and it also whitens the skin. It's a very popular procedure in Korea, and it just evens out the skin tone. So, I did do that. You do notice the results after a couple of days, and it does just even everything out. So, you don't have patchiness or anything. And it was kind of nice. But I've always been pale anyway, so I don't know why I did that, to be honest. Yeah.
So for the nose jobs, so what was your first procedure?
First procedure was a rhinoplasty, so a nose job, and it went terribly wrong.
So you've
really
had to
bad.
have like corrective surgery because of that?
Right. I mean, look, if they would have fixed my nose at the time, I probably wouldn't have gone down all this route. But I think it's because it warped my perceptions. I was so excited for this moment of finally fixing my nose after it was about 23 years. I was always unhappy. And as soon as it was, the bandage was taken off, I had a silicone implant. And it was completely crooked.
No.
So like my nose was...
Why did they even put it in? Was that one of your first surgeries with the implant?
That was in Korea, and that's not something...
I feel like implants, that's not like... That's like a last resort almost.
Yeah, but you know what? That surgery was crazy because I was even under local anesthetic. I wasn't actually asleep. So I could hear like the chisel and like the saw and stuff. It was scary. So I don't think they did it right. I mean, that was in Korea, but yeah, so, they messed up my nose completely.
So is part of your nose now like it's fake? It's like silicone in there?
So actually, surprisingly, I don't have any plastic in my face. I know people know I've had a lot of surgery, but
were they able to like pull cartilage somewhere else?
Cartilage, yeah. So the nose now would have used cartilage from the back of my ear. And in some procedures, not for me, but they can do rib harvesting for cartilage if somebody needs that. And in Korea, they even offered me like pig skin. And I was like, I'm vegetarian. I'm not doing that. So yeah.
So what was like the most difficult surgery out of all of them?
I mean, the one that nearly killed me, which is actually what I talk about in the first chapter of my book, is gynecomastia. So is
that the fat nipple removal? Right. Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So that's a condition that some men do get. And it's basically you have that extra fatty tissue around the chest. And it's very horrible and demeaning for a man because it emasculates you. I was teased so much in swimming class about that. It was
So
really
you had it as
bad.
like a kid always growing up.
It was horrific. So basically it looked like I had breasts the boys at the swimming class would be like horrific to me, and I would try to forget my swim kit, and then the teacher would find a spell and then I'd still have to do it. It was just, and all the kids were laughing at me. So that bothered me. So I did that surgery in Armenia because I couldn't find a doctor in the UK that would do it.
Really?
Yes.
It's kind of common now, at least in America.
No, it's common, but they basically said, you're not an ideal candidate, you're fine, just go to the gym. And I was going to the gym and it just didn't work. And so I went to Armenia, and the hospital was literally, looked like it was from the 1950s. It was so basic. I thought I was going to die, and, I could have died. And in the operating room, I remember going in there, and it was just a concrete floor, a bright light, and just a silver hot, cold table. And most of them couldn't speak English, and that was tough. And then I remember being in bed for 3 days, couldn't even move an inch, couldn't even reach for a glass of water, and the nurses barely checked on me.
Yeah.
And after 3 days, they pulled these plastic tubes out of my nipples. Horrific, and it had the drains with the blood. Pulled it out without warning. I didn't even know they were inside me, and it was the worst pain I've ever felt. And then they used this kind of branding iron, like they do with cattle, to put on the nipples to kind of sew it back up or something. So horrific. So that was the worst.
And was that like, had you had done like a lot of like face surgery, or like was that kind of an earlier one on because you wanted to get that fixed? Or
that was actually early on. So that was 2018. So at that point I'd done, I think that was my fourth nose surgery. Yes, I think that was my fourth nose surgery. So I'd done 4 nose surgeries and gynecomastia, and I think that was it at that point. Yeah.
So how were you paying for this?
So basically, I used to be a personal shopper. So I used to, in London, working with celebrities, working with different brands, Tom Ford, Gucci, Alaya, and just dressing like, successful women for events and for parties and stuff. And then, later on, obviously, I'm a social media influencer now, so I do brand deals. I also have like a PR agency with my business partner, and we do branding for influencers, getting them, magazine covers, press features and stuff like that. And but yeah, at the time, I mean, it was over a 10-year period, but it was, going to other countries was cheaper than the UK.
Yeah.
But I also cut corners because the doctors in the UK wouldn't do certain things on me, and I was putting myself at risk. I didn't care. I'd find a doctor on Instagram and I would just go, and it would be a bit cheaper than the UK, and I would just go for it.
Yeah. So you had multiple moments where you talk to surgeons and are like, no, I'm not operating on you.
Yeah, a lot. So all of the ones in the UK, I've never had a surgery in the UK. So, that's, they just wouldn't operate. So that's why I've had surgery in Armenia, Poland, America, Korea, and China.
And so are they not operating on you because of health reasons or just because they don't want to participate like in that?
So a variety of reasons. So a lot of the doctors would say basically once you've had one nose surgery, a lot of doctors don't want to touch it because it's more risky and it's complicated and they don't want to be responsible for any issues. So that's one reason. The other reason is, you have to do all these psychological evaluations and stuff and, I wouldn't pass them. So that's why I'll go to foreign countries where they don't even do those checks.
Yeah.
Give them the money, book the appointment and it's done, So yeah, some of the doctors were like, we're not going to do that, because the UK surgeons, they're a little bit more conservative than, let's say, Chinese or Korean.
Yeah.
Because they'll do the jaw surgery, the chin. The British ones don't really do that. They only do things that are necessary. So maybe a woman that's been flat chested, they might give her a breast enhancement or fix a bump in the nose. But, in terms of the crazy things I was doing, they weren't really doing that in the UK.
And for jaw surgery, are they inserting something or are they like shaving it down?
Shaving. So there are some plastic surgeons that can put implants if somebody wants, for instance, a masculine jaw. But it was 2019, I actually had something called mandible angle reduction. So they shave all the bones down and the chin as well. I also had zygoma reduction, which is shaving the cheeks down. And that basically made my face more symmetrical, more cute, more feminine. Round, exactly. Yeah. And it's kind of weird because now I'm just back to, trying to find my masculinity again. I'm trying to reverse that. Yeah. And I'm not doing surgery anymore, but I've done, filler recently just to try and regain that old jaw that I had. So, I do regret a lot of the things I've done and put myself through pain, but what can you do?
Yeah. So, and I also think that part of this addiction too is that like you have been very open about it all. So then you're talking about it and you're getting a bunch of press. So you're getting rewarded for kind
bad
of like
behavior, basically.
Being like a train wreck almost. Yeah. Like they want to see you just doing the next craziest thing. And then there's a Daily Mail article or The Sun or whoever is going to talk about you. So there's one article or some statement I read where you were talking about getting like penis reduction surgery to be more Korean, which I guess is kind of a stigma. Like the Asian people have like smaller genitalia. Is that something you like? Is that like a headline you were trying to like get at some point, or are you actually considering doing?
No, I was actually considering not having penis at all because I wasn't sure of my gender. So I was like, shall I just cut it off and stuff? And the media sensationalized it a bit and stuff. But I actually wanted to have it cut off and made into a vagina. So,
well, let's talk briefly. Yeah. When did you think you were maybe trans as like a woman?
So basically throughout my life, I always had those questions. So I was always very feminine as a kid. I always used to get called a girl. I had the man boobs and stuff. So I was always faced with that. And I was always close to girls. The few friends I had were girls, right? Yeah. And I'd like Barbies, I like pink things, Disney, Cinderella, stuff like that. But it was only as an adult when I'd gone through this identity crisis and then I was never happy. I was always happy for like 2 months, right? The surgery had calmed down. It looked amazing. Then after 2 months, the effect had worn off, the serotonin was gone, and then it was back to the next thing and back to being self-critical. So, I kept doing that, and I had all the surgery, the Korean stuff, and it didn't fulfill me. So I thought, maybe I'm chasing in the wrong place. I'm trying to change myself into someone that's a K-pop star, but maybe it's because the gender issue, maybe that's the underlying issue. So, I consulted with some different doctors and then I had facial feminization, which was 11 procedures in one day.
Wow.
And I've got like so many.
Is that where the lifts come in and those
yes,
sort of surgeries?
That's why you can probably see I've got a big white line here. That's actually from a hairline lowering to make the face more feminine. And then I've got, scars on my neck, under my chin. I had the fat removed here as well. So I questioned myself throughout my life, but I wasn't sure. I just thought maybe I've just got severe body dysmorphia. And then the gender stuff would always come back and forth. And then, a couple of years ago, I said to a couple of my close friends, I think I'm meant to be trans. And like, we support you, whatever. We just want you to be happy because they'd seen what I've been through. And then after thinking about that for a few years and, trying on women's clothes at home and stuff and trying on makeup, and I was never good at doing makeup. And so I was thinking maybe this isn't for me. But, then I got to a point where I was like, this must be the thing that's missing in my life because I'm really unhappy with the way I look. So then I had the facial feminization. I, shared that publicly. I went in a pink dress like
Did you have
Barbie.
breast surgery? No.
I didn't. I was...
Were you on hormones?
No, I was planning the breast surgery in Thailand. But thankfully I didn't go through that. But that is a serious thing. So I thought about that a lot because that's like something you can't change.
Yeah.
I always thought the face, I can always change it, right? But the surgery. So then I came out publicly and, I was happy for a few months, just like every other surgery. And then it was like, why am I not happy? Then I was thinking about more surgery and the breast surgery. And then I was thinking in the future, a vaginoplasty, which was, what I'd thought about before. And I just thought, this is never going to make me happy. It's an endless cycle. I'm just going to be happy for 2 months and then So that's when I really just realized, you know what, stop all this craziness, stop all the surgeries, focus on finding happiness from within and just focus on, you know, what's inside, because the outside doesn't really matter.
Yeah. And so what years were you like transgender? Would you say?
So basically, I told my friends around 2020. So I told about 3 or 4 of my friends privately. But I didn't share it online. People could start to see I was more feminine, like I was doing hair extensions, I was doing like the eyelash extensions and stuff. But I wasn't sure myself. So it was actually early 2022, I had the surgeries, facial feminization. And then literally 6 months after that, when I was at this pivotal moment, I was like, do I keep going and do I do the breast surgery or the penis surgery, or do I actually work on myself? You know, I started going to therapy and I was like, let me just work on myself and take a step back, because this is never going to make me happy.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, so when you said like earlier too, when you were going to see doctors about like transitioning to a woman, like were any of these doctors ever a psychologist? Like were you ever seeing any like mental, like,
I should have.
Because I feel like a lot of, or at least like in America, from my understanding, it seems like the becoming transgender is relatively regulated in the sense that like if you go and try to like get on hormones or surgery, they're going to make you go and see a psychologist first. So you never like went on to see a psychologist before you kind of like personally came to this decision that you could be transgender?
No, I actually didn't. So some plastic surgeons, when you go there, they do give you a psychologist appointment before to make sure you're a suitable candidate. You know, there were 1 or 2 surgeons that, you know, I basically lied to the psychologist, like, oh yeah, I'm totally fine. I'm just like, I'm absolutely fine. It's just, I want to do a slight improvement. And, you know, like 10 surgeries on my face, just a slight tweak. And I would convince them that that's what I wanted to do. But then, you know, some of these foreign countries, they don't give you that. It's just, yes, sure, whatever you say, sir.
Whatever you, you just pay and we're good.
Just, exactly. So, you know, I did skip a lot of corners, but I think, you know, I should have done that. I think if I would have spoken about it and, you know, let all of this stuff off my chest, you know, maybe they could have said, you know, maybe let's just give you counseling, you know, regular sessions like once a week and stuff. And let's work on the root cause of all this. Why are you chasing this kind of perfect image and this identity crisis? What is wrong inside? You know, how can we fix that?
Well, it also seemed like too, you were so convinced that this next thing would be the solution that it's like you almost like thought everything was okay. It's like, there's no problem. It's just once I get this, then I'll be good.
Always. That was always the case. And it was always like just one more thing. Just need one more nose surgery, just one more eye surgery, and then I'm happy. And I would tell people around me, you know, I wouldn't tell my family until I'd had the surgery, then they'd be upset. But then I'd say that was the last surgery I'd promise. And, you know, that's a horrible thing to promise something and then, you know, lie. And I promised, you know, my friends and family that's it. And then, you know, 6 months down the line, I was back again and, you know, and I couldn't keep any of the promises. And I would never have stopped. You know, I would never have stopped. I would have only stopped when I would have died on the operating table, and that was the point it was getting to, because you know, so I'd done 32 surgeries, but that was probably, you know, I did multiple surgeries at different times and stuff, but so I think going under anesthetic about 9 times. So, you know, that puts yourself at risk. The more times you go under anesthetic, you know, the more risks you have with blood clots and complications. So I was getting to that point, you know, my nose could fall off and, you know, have to have a prosthetic, and so it was getting to that point. So you know, I had to stop at some point, otherwise I'm just going to end up dead.
So I know that you said you were trying to work on your relationship with your family. So throughout all these years of surgery and these personal identity crises, like, were they just like so hard on you? Like, is that what kind of like destroyed your relationship, was like this personal discovery and then their like immediate like unapproving of it?
Yeah, I mean, they had the best intentions. They were actually trying to stop me, and they could see that I was going through a mental health crisis, but I would not listen. I would not listen to anyone. It was what I wanted to do in my head, and so I wouldn't listen. You know, they really did struggle with it, and it really affected my relationships with a lot of people that I was close to. You know, they were in despair. So I wouldn't listen, and I was jetting off to different countries. I'd always promise, oh, I'm just going on vacation, and then I'd come back with like a completely new face and stuff. So it was very, very upsetting and traumatic to put them through that. And I've seen that now, and I've really realized that was horrible. But I didn't see it at the time. I was, you know, lost in my own world and struggling with that mentality.
Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I got a sister, yeah.
Yeah, is she like a little bit more chill than your parents are on it all, or is she?
I mean, no one in my family supported what I did. And I think, you know, good parents, that's how it should be. You know, they don't want their kids to do all these things when, you know, they're clearly struggling with it and then sharing it online and stuff. So, you know, they were all against it. But I was telling myself that this is the only solution to be happy, is to change. And it was that constant thing. It was, you know, 2 months of happiness, back to square one.
Yeah.
I need to fix this. I need to fix my eyebrows and my eyes. And it was just never ending.
And to clarify timeline, you kind of like transracial, like became Korean, then you transgender, became woman. So then you're like Korean woman. And then you had like this awakening where you're like, you know what? No, I'm not these things anymore. I'm going to step back. And like now you identify as like, you know, just a man from the UK, right?
Just me. But yeah, exactly. But, you know, everyone has a different journey, and I support people, you know, I support adults that have their own journey and stuff. And life is a struggle for many people, especially in this day and age with social media. We know we see filters, we see the perfect image, and there's a lot of pressure to look a certain way. And that's kind of what I fell for originally in Korea, because there was so much pressure to have an aesthetic, because that's why Koreans do these surgeries. Unless you have that look, you're never going to achieve anything, you know. So I've gotten away from that, but I think so many young people are stuck in that trap of, you know, they want to change because maybe they've seen an influencer or something online or a filter, and they don't feel good enough. But my thing now is, you know, trying to tell people just to try and find love within yourself, you know, try to find that inner confidence, because at the end of the day, that's what's important, as long as we learn to love ourselves. And I obviously didn't listen to that message before, but finally, you know, that was actually BTS's messages, ironically, like love yourself. Now I'm actually listening to that.
So when you had this like breakthrough, this 180, was it like a personal thing you just had gone through, or you mentioned like seeing doctors, like psychologists, like, so you went through therapy over some time and that kind of helped you get to this point. Was the therapy also in part like of you rediscovering your faith?
Yes, it was. So basically, I needed some kind of outlet to reflect on my life, and I was going so fast, you know, with all this surgery stuff and the identity struggles. I was just going like a train that's about to go off the tracks, and I just could not stop 100 miles an hour. So I started doing therapy, and then I started retracing my childhood. So, you know, going back to old places that I remembered, that I was familiar with, you know, going on forest walks that I remembered as a kid, and trying to regain these lost memories that I'd suppressed in my mind for so long. I couldn't remember the old me. I'd look at a picture of the old me and I think, I don't know that person. That person is dead. And that's how I thought about myself. And I never thought about who I was. I'd unlocked all these memories. So yeah, going to a psychologist, it was about trying to relive who is Oli, who is the old me, and going back and retracing those steps. Then also going to church just to find some clarity, because I would leave my phone at home, which for me is difficult because I'm always on my phone. In this day and age, and you know, just leaving my phone off and just having some peace, closing my eyes, praying, and you know, asking for answers. And that was like an enlightening moment, that I'd taken some time out of my life and just reflected and thinking, hang on a minute, this is not healthy. This is not good for me. It's not good for people. It's not good for people that see me online. It's like I'm protecting myself as a negative role model. So I need to fix that. Because otherwise it's just going to end very, very badly.
Yeah. So you've had a lot of changes. Are you still identifying as Christian?
Yeah, it's not an identity. It's just I'm going to church, and it's brought me a lot of kind of happiness and fulfillment. Yeah. So yeah, I don't want to have like labels anymore. I'm just me.
So do you think and just because you've gone through so many surgeries and those things, do you think like going into a church or any like normal setting, like do people have like a reaction to you, or at least even knowing your story too? Like, are they maybe not as welcoming, or if you had a good experience there?
I mean, it's quite mixed, because to be honest, the church was lovely. Like, everyone's very friendly, very nice and sweet. And, you know, I have all the time, when we were in Cannes Film Festival recently, I had, you know, all sorts of people coming up to me, women, grandmas, teenagers, and just saying thank you for speaking up and trying to teach people to love themselves and stuff. So, you know, I've had that, but of course I get, you know, I've always had haters, right? So we'll get haters, but you know, of course I have that and stuff. But I get a lot of Koreans still coming up to me. They always want a selfie and stuff. But you know, I do get the hate. But I think, you know, hate's mostly an online thing. You know, these internet warriors and trolls, they're hiding behind the screen. But
they are.
You know, when they meet you in real life, they're like, oh my God, I want to get a picture and stuff. So like, I think most of the hate is online.
So do you believe like that someone can be transracial in general, or do you think that's just kind of like a mental illness?
Well, I think my thinking at the time was, if everyone else can identify changing gender, changing their pronouns and they, them, and whatever, why not? That was my thinking at the time. And now I think, you know, it is culturally insensitive, because, you know, people that have born in Korea or wherever, it can be culturally insensitive. So I don't think so. But I think, you know, in this day and age, there are so many identities. It just seems like it's one of those things that is like, why not? Because how do these activists say, oh, you can't do this, but it's perfectly fine to be, you know, transgender, which, I support adults doing whatever they want to do and stuff. But I think that's one argument people can make.
Well, okay, so that is like a societal thing. Do you think that like transracial exists? Like, I feel like either you could say like yes or no. Like do you think it exists? Like maybe for some people in their world, but in your mind, do you think it even like it's a thing? Or do you think when you see, especially as someone who has identified as that, can you look back and be like, no, you're just mentally not well?
Well, it's in the mind. It is in the mind. So that's important to acknowledge. And it is that person, how they feel maybe.
Yeah.
But it's not what the world is. You can't, I acknowledge that you can't just change your race and stuff now, but like it's what's in the people's minds. So it is a mental health struggle, just like with many young people. Gender dysphoria can be a severe mental health struggle, struggling every day to accept themselves and find out who they are and stuff. So I think it's comparable.
So transracial, maybe not a real thing, but they're just mentally going through it. What about transgender? Do you believe that's like a real occurrence?
Yeah, of course. There's been, for instance, in my book, I've got a whole chapter about transgender history. So there was a Roman emperor who was trans. He was dressing as a woman, and his wife had to call him ma'am. And he was going to like all these brothels because they loved all that in ancient Rome and stuff. And he was dressing as a woman. And there's all sorts. There was in the American Civil War, there was a woman that wanted to be in the war, and so she identified as a man and lived her life like that. So there's examples throughout history and stuff. So of course there are people that generally feel that way, and I support adults if that's how they feel and they're convicted with that. But I think what's happening now is the thing that's being pushed on kids, and that's what I'm very vocal about. And people don't seem to understand that, because when someone speaks up about we should let kids wait until they're adults, right, to do things like surgeries and hormones and stuff, they say, oh, you're transphobic and stuff. And it's not about that. It's about, look, we have to have some kind of boundaries here, because I've got trans friends, I know many trans people, and particularly the older trans people that have been trans for like 20, 30 years. They share the same opinion that everything was fine. They were living their lives. And then suddenly this thing that's being pushed on kids has caused them a lot of damage. They can't live their lives anymore. They can't do what they want to do, because now they're being conflated into this new movement that is actively trying to pressure kids to change. And I think kids just need to discover themselves on their own. Let kids be kids. Once you become an adult and you've thought about it, and I think it is important to have those checks and balances in terms of meeting with doctors and therapists and psychologists, because I know I skipped all of that, but I think that is important, because too many young people these days are going with something because they feel like it that day, right? Or it's a short-sighted thing. They feel like that in the moment. So then a therapist or a doctor says, okay, I have the perfect solution. Here's some hormones, or let's book you for a surgery, instead of actually, reflecting on that for a longer period of time until they become an adult.
So on the H3 podcast, you said that...
that was the worst.
How was your experience on there?
I thought he was so nasty and rude.
Really? He was?
Really, really. I thought, because I'd seen him before and stuff. I always thought it was cool with Trisha and stuff, but... really out of order.
Was it in person or like digital?
Digital, yeah.
Digital. So I think at one point you said something about the trans movement is grooming children, and obviously grooming is like one of those trigger words.
I wouldn't have said that. No, I would have said that there are people within the trans activists that are pushing this agenda on kids and stuff. But that H3 guy, he was trying to
rally you
get
up.
a soundbite. He was trying to get a soundbite, and he did roll me up and stuff. I held my ground for a while, and I was just like, what? Called me a devil or something, so I just hung up.
Yeah, that's like it's
not, he wasn't professional, and I do a lot of interviews and I'm very open-minded about talking about things, but he was really unprofessional. I know he's done that with a few people and stuff, and he said some shocking things, but it obviously got him the views he wanted. So
yeah. Well, I think it's important to challenge someone, but also if they have an explanation, then let them explain it. Don't because we all have different beliefs too. It's like shitting on someone's beliefs. It's like half my audience, is, I know they're conservative, half is like
and it's
liberal,
about trying to have a balance, right?
Yeah, it's also just being a rational thinking person, and seeing what the point. I mean, I think everyone has a point. At the end of the day, it's just deciphering which parts you agree with and what you don't. So moving on to I've seen you on so much media, I think this year, because the right wing is eating you up. Tucker Carlson, the Fox News. So you found yourself, or started to find yourself. You found your faith, and then when did this outspokenness for conservative policy kind of come about, and you start getting connected with all these news stations?
Well, I always say that I'm very happy to give an interview to a left-wing liberal channel, but unfortunately they don't talk about these issues. They don't like to give that other perspective. So, and that's why I did the H3 podcast. I knew he was more liberal than others ones,
Yeah.
but that was horrendous. That was really unprofessional, like the way he kept cutting me out and stuff. And, it's not how you conduct an interview. I do interviews all the time. That's not it. So, I'm open-minded to doing, CNN or something, even though I don't agree with what their network pushes and stuff, but that's what I'm about. I think it's good to have that debate, and people don't have to agree, but it's about presenting different people's opinions, and and speaking about that, I think that's a great thing. But in terms of conservative media, they're the ones that are speaking on these things. For instance, you have detransitioners like Chloe Cole, who's a 19-year-old. You'll never see her on CNN or NBC because they don't like to give that alternative opinion. It's very divided. You have left-wing media, right-wing media, and they're kind of stuck. Stuck polarized, right? So it's and I do try to keep that balance. I know some of the things I say are kind of shocking on Twitter, but you have to say those things to highlight it's actually happening. So if there's for instance, some of the Pride events, and I support the LGBT community, but some of the Pride events, it was Seattle and Toronto. They had naked men in fetish gear and their little kids next to them in the parade, and it's like things like that doesn't look good for the LGBT community. It actually harms them. So I speak on issues like that, and some people say, "Oh, it's controversial." I get called homophobic, which is just ridiculous. At the end of the day, it's not. It's about let's just have some decency. These things that are happening now are actually harming real LGBT people. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, just living their life. They don't want to be a part of all this stuff that's pushing this on kids. So it's the conservative networks. They're the ones that will talk about this, and like I said, I'm happy to speak on CNN or something else like that, but they just won't even have the conversation. They won't even acknowledge it. Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to what's going on in Florida with the drag queens bans and the trans bathroom ban, so just politically, you're for those things because you see what they're talking about in reference to protecting children when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think with drag queens, then obviously you've got some drag queens that are just normal. They dress up as a princess or whatever. But I think there is a harm in when you're taking drag queens into schools and they're reading books about gender ideology and changing gender and pronouns to kindergartners and stuff. And, there are, many videos you can find online of these performers going to schools and, exposing themselves and, just being very sexualized. And I think, kids don't need to see that. Just let kids be kids. So I know Tennessee obviously passed a law banning drag queens in with children present, right? And, I think they classed it basically as adult cabaret entertainment. So I think, traditionally, obviously you have pantomimes, it's a bit different, but you have drag queens can be very sexualized. So I think that's why they passed those laws. And in terms of bathrooms, I think bathrooms, I think it upsets a lot of women. I think, I speak to women all the time. I also speak to trans people. I know it's hard for them, but maybe the solution is just have, a single space toilet, fix everyone's problems for them.
When you were trans, were you going into the women's bathroom?
No, men's. Yeah, but
even
it was
all
weird.
Dressed up as a girl.
But it was weird because every time I go in there, the men in there, they'd be like, "Oh, you're in the wrong bathroom." It'd be really awkward. So I get, for real trans people, I get it is a difficult situation, but I think we have to consult with women, and I think the majority of women are uncomfortable with being confronted with a man. And look, most trans people, they just want to go to the restroom, right? But you do have people taking advantage of these self-identification laws that will say they're trans, they'll put on the hair or whatever to go into a women's restroom and upset the women. And, I've seen that in London in a very exclusive members club. I won't say the name. I was there with two girlfriends, right? And they went to this, it was a gender neutral, it's a very exclusive club, gender neutral restroom. And there was a man masturbating in there. And that was he was in there because it was gender neutral, right? Yeah. So I think there are issues with that for women's safety. And I think it's about, just trying to make women feel comfortable. And let's just make a separate toilet that's gender neutral just for them,
So you've been over sensationalized, excuse me,
that's okay,
on the, through the media. And I would say maybe, so when we're talking about these kids in Florida, I think that, they've removed the ability to teach about sexuality and those things too. And I think that the sexual part is a little bit they're making it seem like it's a lot more than it actually is. I mean, you, as someone who's struggled with their identity, don't you think having exposure to learning at least what gay is, LGBT, having knowledge of that as a kid probably would have helped you find a little bit more security in your own identity? So do you think there's I mean, I understand when it's like the sexual parts of it, but there's also like a big education part that's just being completely suppressed. Don't you kind of feel like it's erasing like, the opportunity for kids to, I mean, I knew I was gay at 10. Like that's when I fully knew I was gay. And probably because I was exposed to it at a younger age. And I don't think like sexually I was, but I knew what it was, in general. Do you see harm in why maybe LGBT people are kind of against this? Because we're almost being erased.
Well, that's what people seem to say, but I think it's really about, kids aren't born with hate. They're not born with judgment, right? It's what they learn in life. But I think, there are a lot of things that are being taught. There are some of these books and they do contain sexually graphic stuff and also things about gender identity. So for preschoolers or kindergarteners, I don't think that's a conversation they need to be learning. They need to be learning about science, about mathematics, about history. So, it's important to educate people on always being inclusive and accepting of people. So, to some extent, but I don't think when you're actively teaching children, okay, you can change your pronouns if you want, you can change your identity, because it's not a harmless thing, because these kids are actually going on puberty blockers and hormones and surgeries. So it's not like, oh, it's just a harmless thing. They're actual like real world consequences that, they're stuck with for life, basically.
So you seem like very educated in this topic, and obviously that's why they're like pulling you out here for these interviews and things. You haven't in all respect too, you haven't like been this person for that long. If you look at your entire life, you've had so many changes. So this could be just a new wave of who you are. I mean, unless I would love for you to be like completely happy and satisfied with yourselves. That's what we all want.
I am. Yeah.
But do you think that like you also, I feel like you're being exploited because you like have a certain look. You're obviously like not the traditional like conservative. So then they're throwing you out there and using you as like a little puppet to like push their like agenda because you actually look different than finally what we see on TV. Do you ever, I mean, while I hope this isn't happening, do you feel like a little exploited, or can you kind of at least see why like they want to have you on? Because it's like, back in the day, having the black conservative or whatever, when they tried to do things that were racial, it just kind of seems like now you're like the token gay boy who's going to go over and like speak on the anti-trans movement.
It's not that at all. I don't identify myself as conservative or liberal. I'm just trying to be balanced and get through to people like parents and just educate people and stuff. So it's not about, and like I said, it's the left-wing media will not have people like me or anyone speaking about these subjects, and I'm more than happy to go on CNN and debate someone that has a different opinion. I think it's very important to debate people, and I think that's a fantastic thing. And I think that's one way we can actually fix all of these issues we're having right now, people fighting against each other. Just bring people together. Let's bring, for instance, I was in the UK recently doing a show, and I'd arranged it all. I brought a trans friend that was in their 50s. They'd been trans for a long time. Then I brought a women's rights activist and brought them together, and I was stuck in the middle trying to have that conversation. So I'm more than willing to speak on a channel like CNN, but they will not have this topic. So I'm very passionate about speaking about this. I know I have had so many crazy identity struggles and stuff, and I generally have overcome that. And, I get the criticism. People say, oh, is this his new phase? Like Oli 10.0, and I get that. No, I get that because I myself was really going through this madness, literally going through this madness. And I've actually got to a point in my life for the first time where I actually feel at peace within. And I'm trying to be careful with my message because it is such a sensitive subject, because I always try to say, I'm not trying to hate on anyone. I'm literally trying to speak some common sense. And look, I've done a lot of research in this area, for my book and for what I speak about. And, let's just find a common ground here, because trans people have a right to exist. Women have a right to feel safe. Kids have a right to, grow up and live their lives. So let's just try to find some balance. So I'm more than happy to speak on a left-wing media, but they just won't have me.
Now, have you had any like big trans activists like shut you out and be like, you don't speak for us, like you weren't even like really trans? Like
I get a lot
dismissed. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I get a lot. They're always tweeting about me and stuff. I mean, like Dylan Mulvaney's blocked me and stuff.
Oh, really?
But again, I'm very open-minded. I'm more than happy to debate someone. I think it's a beautiful thing in democracy. You can have that free speech and stuff. And I think that's the only way to fix it right now, because it's so polarized and it's so many people are upset right now and fighting against each other. I think let's have a conversation. Let's bring reasonable people, trans people, women's rights activists, parents' rights activists. Let's bring them together and let's talk about this. How can we fix this? How can we fix the toilet issue? How can we fix the issue with kids, women's rights and stuff like that? I think that's the solution. So that's what I want to do now, is bring people together.
Thoughts on Dylan, because you brought her up. Not a fan. So, and especially like just the whole like idea of how they present everything and has done everything.
Well, look, I think Dylan's actually harmful to real trans people that are just out there living their lives day to day. I think Dylan presents a parody of what it is to be a woman and also what it is to be a trans person. So I think, some of their, look, I know TikTok, Dylan on TikTok, he likes the views and stuff and the clout. And I'm going to say that, he's a clout chaser, but
She.
well, yeah. I always very respectful to people, but I generally
a lot of people
believe,
don't like her, so they they refuse.
It's not because I dislike her, because I'm always respectful to people, but it's because I don't believe Dylan's actually trans. Because 9 months ago, Dylan said they had started hormones and they shared it on TikTok. There are no results, and I speak to trans people, I speak to doctors. You would see results after 6 months. There's no results, no voice change, no, she had facial heat or whatever.
Yeah,
so difficult.
They did.
And look, I don't do that to be mean or anything, misgendering people, but I don't believe Dylan Mulvaney is actually trans. I think he's seen something. He's mocked women, saying he's going to have a period, he needs tampons, he's going to get pregnant. Now he's a lesbian. So I don't think he's legit, and I think he actually harms normal trans people that are just trying to live their lives day to day. And, they don't want to be a parody. They don't want to be a caricature. They just want to be, happy within. Mm-hmm.
So when you see people like Got Mick, I don't know if you know Got Mick, the drag queen who's also, and then Gigi Gorgeous, like, do you think those people are better representations of the trans community than what, because Dylan's now like, I feel like almost number one thrown in our face. So do you just think that there are better people out there like Gigi or, others that would be...
Yeah, I think, I know who Gigi is. I think Gigi's a good role model, just always a bit like Paris Hilton, always glamorous, always fun, doesn't get any political, just out there living her life, not trying to push it on people. Yeah. And I think that's the difference. I think, like you said, it is unfair to trans people because look, Dylan's the face of every brand, right? Maybelline, Bud Light, all of these brands and stuff, and they're all getting cancelled because of their association with Dylan. And it's like, stop shoving Dylan in people's faces. There are actual people out there. Blair White, she's conservative YouTube, but I think, Blair White's great and stuff. I think there are people out there that, much better than Dylan, but I'm just, you could tell.
I wonder if Bud Light if they did do Blair, if it would have been like the same reaction, because Blair's so like, guns and American flags. Like,
you know what? It would go with the brand, because you have to think, and look, it's not about saying that, trans people can't have a brand deal. It's about, if you're a business that markets to particularly, men, right? Mm-hmm. Like men in Kentucky and Texas, Bud Light. Yeah. If you're marketing to them, why on earth would you alienate your entire customer base, right? So it doesn't make business sense. So, someone like Blair White, I don't think, Blair White is conservative, right? So she appeals to conservatives, but, advertise with a product that's relevant. Mm-hmm. So I don't think the Dylan Mulvaney thing with Bud Light, I think it was a disastrous partnership. They're still paying the price today. And it just didn't represent their customer base at all. So I think that was just virtue signaling. They just wanted to look like they were doing something inclusive and stuff, but it spectacularly backfired.
Yeah. So talking a little bit about business, because you have like a new business launch. Like, this is going to be great. A whole new project. So your book, Gender Madness, let's talk a little bit about it. Mm-hmm. So because you go through so many changes, like how long are you actually working on, like how long was the new Oli working on this?
So I actually started writing it in December.
So like not even a year?
Yeah, but I'd basically been writing down ideas about my life, and I speak a lot about the Korean stuff. I speak about, basically the first half of the book is how I got to where I was, right? With the struggle with the identities and all of that, all the surgeries, what led to that. And then the second half is about a lot of research I've done since then, because, I've researched a lot of different studies, a lot of different, country laws, state laws, and included that in the second half of the book, just to discuss what's going on right now and, trying to be balanced. I have a chapter on transgender history and how it came about and how the first trans surgeries were in Germany in the 1920s, Dr. Magnus Hirschen, and just to educate people. I think it's important, and to present the issues and the facts, and people can draw their own conclusions, right? But really this book is about trying to motivate people, because look, I went through a crazy identity crisis, struggle with mental health, but it's about overcoming that adversity and trying to find happiness and confidence from within, because that's the key message here. It's about inspiring young people, don't change whether you're changing your gender or changing because you want to look like a filter or a celebrity. Just, try to find happiness and peace within, and don't go down that extreme route.
Mm-hmm. Well, you definitely know your audience, because even right here with the woke ideology, it's like
I'm always talking about woke stuff though. Yeah, I used to be quite woke, because I was in this mindset. I was like, you can identify as any way you want, and hence the Korean thing. I didn't see the problem at the time, and now I've seen, woken up and I've actually seen, the world has gone very woke. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So how so let's some reactions. So how is like your conservative friends, like press and everything? Are they all like really excited about this? Like, are you going and like doing interviews about the book and like they're giving you a platform like on Fox and those things to go and push it?
Well, but it's about helping all people. So it's not for conservatives or liberals. It's for everyone,
Yeah.
right? So I don't want to cast myself in the net because I'm not conservative or liberal. I just want to be, balanced. So I'm trying to help all people. I want people to have a conversation. I think this is an important issue right now. Young people, not just the trans stuff, young people want to change themselves because of social media, right? So I've got chapters discussing how TikTok came about, how that has influenced a lot of young people, short attention spans, wanting to change themselves for validation and for likes and views and stuff, and how that is really harming an entire generation. So this book is, it's not for any specific group. It's for everyone. If you're struggling with identity, if you're a parent, if you're a young person, if you're a teacher, if you're a doctor, whatever, I think this is going to help people.
So I just want to ask about TikTok. So TikTok, you like were, outspoken about banning it, but then I saw you posted one yesterday. So are we here for TikTok? Or are we not here for TikTok?
I don't really use TikTok. I'm not for banning it, but I'm for some changes to it because I think there are security concerns. But equally, I'll also call out Meta because Meta has all our data and stuff, and Mark Zuckerberg sells our data. So I think that's equally bad. But I have spoken about the TikTok thing before because I think there are harmful things pushed on there, and I think it is owned by the China, right, and they answer to the Chinese government. So there is a direct influence. When there was the midterm elections, you had a lot of videos from pro-Chinese government kind of newspapers criticizing, for instance, Republicans and not Democrats equally. So it's trying to alter the minds of young people and push these different things on them. So I think but Instagram as well, and Meta also equally.
So have you reactions? I'm sure the conservative people are super about it, but have you had a lot of liberal people or activists or anyone on the other side, I guess, speak out about this book, like specifically targeting and be like, do not support this? Or
so when I actually announced the book, it was I think it was in February. I had a lot of trans activists trying to cancel it, so that they emailing the publisher and the distributor and stuff.
Wow.
And a really like intense hate campaign, and it's probably going to get bad. When the book's out and stuff, it's just what they do. And I think at the end of the day, books are meant to be about people expressing themselves, right? So regardless, whatever book it is, we should be entitled to read it. It's our personal choice whether we buy the book or read it or not. So I think cancelling a book is ludicrous. And, we've seen Roald Dahl, the children's author, his books have been rewritten so they're more woke and, and it's just like, that's just silly. They're just books. If a book was written 100 years ago, it is going to have some views that aren't reflective of today's society. But it's up to the reader to make their own decisions. And that's what I'm doing with the book. I want people to read it, form your own decision, because I do try to be as balanced as I can in the book. I'm not trying to ostracize any person in society. I'm just trying to find a solution. Can we have a conversation together? Can trans people speak with women? Can parents speak with trans activists? Can we sort this thing out? Because it's hurting a lot of people right now.
Yeah. Well, I think it's cool that you did like research for this book and that you do like look into laws and policy and those things, but you also, it's kind of a memoir as well. Like it's about your own experience. And I think like for me too, like having my trans friends and stuff, obviously I'm very supportive of them, but it's hard to like, for me to fully understand what they go through in their struggles. And I think it's interesting that you have partially put yourself in those points and now you are reflective of it. So I do think you have a valid voice in this conversation. So
especially I've been through some extremes, but so the first half of the book is talking about all of that, what led to it, my childhood and stuff. And, because I think there's a variety of factors that do lead people to want to change themselves because they feel unhappy with him.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited about it. Did you?
Thank you.
So you wrote it?
Yeah. No, I didn't.
Do you have help?
No, people actually ask that. Do you have a ghost? I was offered a ghostwriter, but actually I think, why would you have a ghostwriter? Because it's not your voice, right?
Yeah.
So I actually did it. People don't think I'm capable of writing a book. I have so many comments on Twitter, as if he wrote the book. He's not capable of even writing a tweet. But I actually wrote the book. And I did a lot of research because, I actually studied English at university, so I do know how to write. And I just, I hadn't written for a long time. So this was really hard work. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, to all the people out there saying, he can't write a book, I actually wrote this. No ghostwriter actually wrote it. Of course, they edit it and stuff.
They help you edit it. Yeah,
of course. Yeah, of course. Because I'm not an author by nature, right? This is my first book. So But yeah, to everyone out there, I did actually write this in my own words.
And how did you, I mean, I guess it's like your influencer status helped you get to a publishing company, right? Like how did you, so then you were luckily, because a lot of people, it's even getting a publisher to
It's really hard.
sign. Yeah, really hard.
Really
so
hard.
that's I mean, you said you started, so you got the deal and you started writing it back in like December and then pretty quick turnaround.
This the publisher's very quick.
Yeah.
Because they publish like RFK Jr.'s books. Who else do they publish? A lot of political books. But my publisher's amazing, Skyhorse Publishing, because they don't believe in cancel culture, right? Because a lot of publishers wouldn't take me because it's a controversial subject. Some people consider me controversial. Wonder why? Yeah. But but it's true. But with this book, it's the publisher doesn't support cancel culture, so they are very open-minded about publishing books with different opinions, and I think that's really important. So I'm very blessed to have someone, a team to work with that actually, believe in free speech. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I am so against like silencing people, like no matter whose voice it is. It's like, and even if there's a horrible negative reaction to it all, it's like people are still gonna like buy it because people feed into all those things. It's like same with like YouTube or media. It's like people like, if it's going to evoke some type of feeling or emotion or like, piss some people off. I mean, that's, you'd rather have that than some boring book that nobody wants to pay attention to.
And like I said, it's a book, so everybody will have a different opinion, and it's up to the reader to decide what their opinion is after reading it. So, I think it's important for all people.
Awesome. Well, that's pretty much all the questions I have for you, unless you have anything to add.
No, it's so nice finally meeting you because, I always watch your channel, like all the Amanda Bynes stuff, the Britney stuff, and you are like the number one source for all the latest news, so it's really cool to be here.
Do you think Britney's okay?
No, I'm actually really worried about her. I mean, I follow your videos, but I look at the TikToks and stuff, and if someone is that superstar level, your team or the people around you would not allow you to post those things, right? Those videos, and it's constant spinning around, and she does not look very well, and it's very, very concerning. And she's out the conservatorship now, but she's suffering. And what I was shocked, when that basketball guy's security hit her in the face. That was shocking. And, her team and bodyguards, whatever, should never have allowed that to happen, So, it's very concerning, very, very concerning. And, I'm not sure on the husband, but, I'm not sure on him.
I've heard a lot of stories, especially like getting like more fit and like talking to these personal trainers and stuff, because he used to be just a personal trainer out here in West Hollywood.
You should be a personal trainer, by the way, because I always see your Instagram picture, always at the gym.
If this doesn't work out, then I think like that's probably my calling. But yeah, I've heard some like sketchy stories about him, and also their wedding. I still like there's something off about the wedding.
The wedding was weird, yeah. And also, Sam is always doing paparazzi setups, right?
Yeah.
It's not like natural that they just bump into him and he's got something to say. It's so I don't think that's right. I think if you have your wife is very vulnerable, your job as a man is to protect her, comfort her, and make sure she's not exposed to these things. So I don't think that's right. And when he did that Instagram live once and she was there and she didn't want to be on it. So I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes that nobody really knows. And, I really worry for her because she's a fantastic entertainer. And another thing I want to say as well, her new song with will.i.am.
Yeah, recorded like a decade ago.
Right. The picture is 20 years old. So that is an alarm bell.
Yeah.
And same with Elton John. She didn't perform that song. There's no music video.
I waited for out. I sat there with the stupid like fake live stream. It was like a off website with all the pop-ups, and she never came on. I was so upset.
No, so that's not right. If she's having this big comeback and she's done a song with will.i.am, you'd at least do a photo shoot. So that just indicates something is up.
Yeah.
So it does remind me very much of the Black Mirror episode with Miley Cyrus.
Yeah, Ashley O.
Very, very similar. Because even when I heard the new song, I was like, is that song like a demo from years ago, or is that even like AI?
Yeah.
Because there's very clever AI, and that's what they did in with Ashley O in Black Mirror. So it's concerning.
Yeah, it is concerning. I'm worried about her. Actually,
I know, because you're always talking about
her.
You're trying
and I
to help
felt
her.
better though when she was in the conservatorship, just because we knew what was going on as far as court documents, and there's so many updates so often. Now it's just like we don't really know what's real anymore.
And there's I noticed a lot of stories like Dana Mel and stuff that try to make her look bad as well.
Yeah.
So, you have people writing things about her to try and discredit her. And look, it's clear she's suffering with something, but I think, all is not what it seems. And, it's just very, very concerning for someone of that status to be posting these videos, spinning around and round and round and round as if she's being controlled or something. It's weird.
Poor Britney.
Well, I know. She's amazing. We love Britney, so I know you're like one of her biggest fans and stuff.
Yeah.
So
I hope like she comes back one day.
And she's got a book.
Yeah, I know. That's going to be really confusing
But
too.
that will definitely have a ghostwriter.
You think so? That's what my
definitely.
dad said. He was like, "Are you sure she's writing it?" There was a picture book. I'm like, I don't know.
Because the picture's old as well. That's not a recent picture of her. So it's just, it seems like they're just using her name and making money off her and stuff. And she's not participating in any of this, which some celebrities do. They basically sign their name off and they get licensed and stuff, and they have no control.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the book sheds some light, but I have a feeling it won't. Anyways, thank you so much for coming on. Everything will be listed below. You guys can go and check out his book and his social media. Thank you so much, Oli, for coming on.
A real pleasure. Let's get into it. Thank you.
Let's get into it. And I'll see you guys in next week's episode. Bye, guys.